Hi, everyone. My name is Phil Blancato. I'm CEO and president of Vladimir Kalman Asset Management, Chief Market Strategist for Jose. Welcome to another weekly market impact. I'm at some big event. I just thought it'd be fun to show you a little bit of a day in my life sometime. The event I'm at is called Odyssey. So we're lucky enough at Jose to have 11,000 independent financial advisors. They're all over the country. And every so often I get invited out to do a presentation about what's happening in the world, things that are economic related. Take Q&A from the audience and have a really engaging conversation. So I said, what the heck? I'll do it with a fun background for once. Why not do something a little bit different? First off, I hope we had a wonderful weekend. And I'll talk about where I'm at in a minute. I'm actually out in San Diego, which is kind of cool. I'll talk about it now. I'm at the Gaylord Pacific. It's a $1 billion facility. I guess they're going to build up quite a bit around here. And what's cool about it, it's got this huge water park. The reason why I mention it is that we're having a convention here, and there's 500 or so advisors over a couple of days. But what's really kind of cool is the place is packed. You know, for all the concerns about the strength of the U.S. consumer, there are certainly a lot of people here spending money, enjoying the water park with their families, and you can see there's really no shortage of people who want to stay in an area that's not exactly the heart of San Diego, a bit outside of it, a bit of a tough area from what I can tell. There's a lot of shipbuilding in the area, yet the place is euphoric and crowded. Why I mentioned it is we got through the World Cup this weekend. Now, hopefully you enjoyed it. Now, let's be clear. I am a disgruntled Italian national team soccer fan. Really upset we haven't made the cup now in 3 times. And who knows when we're ever going to get back to our glory. But Italy has won 4 World Cups. They did not want Argentina to win because I would have made them tie with Italy, and that's not allowed. The other thing I really wanted was the United States to go into the round of 8. I didn't think they would go further than that, but at least the round of 16 or the round of 8, and it just didn't get there. It's too bad. Really disappointing. Maybe the worst loss in American soccer history, because I was hoping that this would really propel to a new height. And I'm going to guess that some folks on this podcast are happy the World Cup is over because they're sick of it at this point and ready for football season. I appreciate that. But isn't that what's cool about the American system? We go from season to season to season for sports. A lot of countries don't have that. They have just soccer, or they may have some water polo and some bicycling. So the F1 is big in the rest of the world. But we go from basketball to football, from football to basketball to hockey to baseball, and now soccer. Professional soccer, doing quite well. Kind of fun that you think as an American sports fan, we get so much opportunity to enjoy our sports celebrities or the games that make us that are just great to watch. So kudos to Spain. Incredible defense. By the way, that's how Italy used to win the World Cups. They only gave up 1 goal in the entire tournament. That's impressive. And though some of the stats around the World Cup are mind-boggling, they're economic. The World Cup will generate $15 billion for FIFA. They use AI to have dynamic pricing, and that they got a piece of every single ticket sale. My only gripe with this World Cup was the ticket sales were just too high. We've got to find a way to get those numbers down. It's not fair for the person who doesn't make a heck of a lot of money to try and attend a game and just can't. But I would say what I was told by some of the players, because some of the coaches who I'm still connected with some of the teams. I used to be a translator for the Italian national team way back when, or involved with the team, is that they were so impressed with the American soccer football stadiums that are incredible, like the Dome in Atlanta, the Mercedes-Benz Arena, it opens up. The beauty of the locker rooms, the facilities, like second to none. And it was everywhere. It was Kansas City, or it was LA, or New York, New Jersey. You know, they were blown away by the power and the size and the scale. The infrastructure that we had to move people was really quite impressive. It was the most lucrative cup ever. Average game attendance per game was the most ever. If you look at the 94 World Cup in the United States, which was the second best ever, the average attendance per game is a little bit lower. But you have to remember that by mixing in Mexico and Canada, they have smaller stadiums. That brought the average down. If you look just America now to America 94, higher numbers. Incredible numbers for the people who were setting it up. Interesting enough, productivity was down around 11% on game days. Can you imagine that? 11% on game days. That's a big number. Much to my surprise, no one thought it was going to be that bad of a drain. But the globe watches soccer. 2 billion people tuned into the final. 2 billion. An incredible number. No one really thought it would be that enormous size either. So when you put it all together, a wildly successful cup, kudos to Spain. My favorite stat was at one of the English soccer games in Boston, over 5 million cans of beer were consumed and they ran out. They had to rush up to Sam Adams and get more beer from the brewery in an emergency scenario. The euphoria of the soccer fans coming to the United States was quite incredible. All those videos, there's a great song out there about talking about all the different sites and what happened. And I think it's just been an amazing experience. I'm sad to see it go. Really wonderful, sad to see it go. As far as my personal life goes, I get a lot of questions about this. Luca, who was on the podcast a while back, is working. She has put her credit card on her phone. So now when it comes to DoorDash and it comes to all things related to her personal spending, that's on her. I agreed. I gave her a pass. I'm going to cover her car insurance because it's part of the family plan. We're going to cover her cell phone, part of the family plan. She can live at home rent free and we'll pay for the food. I like having her home. I know some families charge some rent to the kids and then give it back to them eventually. But I have to figure that out. But all the major stuff is that kind of stuff's on her bar tab, let's call it what it is, when she goes out with friends. Food, nails, hair, that's on her. She's got a job and she's doing great. So I'm excited for her. And sadly, I guess not sadly, Marcella heads back to college here in just a few weeks. Mid-August, she's gone. It happened so fast. I think it's spent nearly as much time with her as I would have liked to. I'll move her back in and I'll be excited for another Georgia Bulldog football season. I don't think they're going to be very good. I think Gunnar Stockton's a good quarterback. It doesn't seem that they picked up enough guys in the transfer portal, and they don't really want to compete on NIL. So I'm a little worried about those Bulldogs and how well they're going to do this year. But that's okay. Now let's get into markets a little bit. Well, certainly a volatile time. We're having, maybe if you want to call it what it is, a bit of a tech wreck right now. Some of these gigantic popular tech names have struggled. And the reason why we are priced to perfection. We have this scenario today where earnings season is going to be quite incredible. You're talking about earnings numbers that are very impressive. And even the S&P, when you look at the current PE ratio, the next 12-month PE ratio, it's 20 right now. We grew up with 18. And we'll go up at 16 to 18, but right now it's been 18 for the last 10 years. So that means more importantly that stocks aren't terribly expensive. We're about to have an earnings season that could be in excess of 20%, maybe as much as 23%. Margins on the S&P 500 can be as much as 15%. And granted, the top 80 stocks are the bulk of the drivers of the S&P 500 for this year. And by the way, we're still up 9.64 on the year. It's been a great year, not a bad year, a great year. Halfway through the year, give or take, it's still up that much. It's quite impressive. But we've had a bit of a challenge in the month of July. The S&P 500 is down 0.5%. The Dow is down 0.3. The Russell 2000 small cap stocks, which we like a lot, they're up 20% on the year, double the S&P 500, but down 2% for the month. Growth stocks down 3.87. Value stocks are the only area you can find some success. They're up 2.26. So being diversified, having large cap value stocks in your portfolio has been meaningful. And the fact of the matter is, being in areas of the market that are non-traditional, other than the big tech names, in other words, other than in the Mag 7, has been very successful. And being diversified matters this year. A balanced account is still up somewhere around 7 to 8% on the year. So really quite impressive. What we did see is the bond market's a bit soft. So disappointingly, is the bond market continues to be not an exciting place to be because of the concerns about oil again. We are in the midst of another conflict, war, whatever you want to call it, 8 days in a row of bombing, and the bond market's reflecting that. What's happening now is the concern about higher oil prices, Brent crude back up to $85 a barrel. If you like paying $3.50 a gallon, as much as $3.20 a gallon I paid in New Jersey, that number is going to change again. Probably go back to $4 a gallon here in short order. And that's because the price of oil pushed up by about $15, 10 to 15, depending on the area. So we have a tough go right now. And the bond market's reflecting that. Now down 0.5% on the year. So, for the quarter, on the year, basically flat. So it's an interesting time when we think about what's happening. Can the earnings season that's about to kick off with 23% earnings growth be good enough to really hold this market on here? was a fun stat I picked up that shows what's happening in the market right now was first it was the hyperscalers. Think about 2025. That's the Mag 7. That's Nvidia. That's Microsoft. That's Google. That's big Apple. These big name, or really the big AI drivers of companies that are really pushing the narrative of adopting AI and in the private space, Anthropic, OpenAI, and obviously some of the other companies. But the hyperscalers, companies that are spending billions to add AI, Amazon, Mike, as I mentioned, Microsoft, all these big companies that are spending as much as $700 billion to add AI or sell AI to all of us. That's what happened in 2025. But this year's market, believe it or not, the first quarter was still some of that. 34% of returns or the earnings growth of the first quarter was at hyperscalers, those names I just mentioned. But 31% were semiconductors or chips. Now, 50% of the earnings of this next quarter will be from the chip manufacturers or what's known as the semis. The rest of the S&P, 43%. The hyperscalers will only represent 9%. So that's a change. That means the Magnificent Seven are not that magnificent. Things have changed a bit. And I think that means your portfolio has to change. You've got to be willing to accept that things are a bit different right now. And if you're not just riding the tide of the stocks of the last 10 years, you could be losing money. So I think it's time for you to realize that diversification does matter. Being in other asset classes besides the Mag 7 does matter. And in fact, when you think about where the puck has gone this year, as I mentioned, small cap stocks have done really quite well. But you know what else has done well? In fairness, a bit tech related. When you look at places like emerging markets this year, they've done pretty darn good. Emerging market stocks, called EM, while they're down 6% for the quarter, which is a big number, are up still 16, almost 17% on the year. Not as much as small caps, but doing very well. You know what else is up? Also about the same as the S&P 500 is traditional international developed stocks, up 9.2% on the year, almost the same as the S&P 500. So you really have this scenario right now where there's other things you can invest in that are doing quite well. And also, by the way, limiting some of the risk in your portfolio. So that's an interesting point because we have to be careful about not betting all our chips on one bet or not riding one horse to success here. You have to be diversified. I'll give you a headline which is somewhat concerning to me. That in the new war, the reacceleration of the war, we do have this problem right now where, in fact, we could see oil prices push higher than I would have expected up until this point. And the reason why is the supply of reserves. Think about the U.S. has a supply of emergency reserves. Europe has a supply. Japan has a supply. China has a very big supply, the biggest in the world. Everywhere but China has been whittled down during the beginning of this conflict. So we had this break in between, and not a lot of countries refill their supply. They use their excess supply to hold down their costs of inflation due to oil, and now they've used up a lot of it. If we get a prolonged spike in oil, now 85 is not a big deal, but if we get a prolonged spike where it goes back to 100 or 120, and we see the cost of it go much higher, that could be inflationary. So I'm beginning to focus on the month of September, the worst month of the year, that there's potential for higher inflation if the conflict doesn't get resolved. The stock market being priced to perfection, incredible earnings season, yet we're down for the quarter. And then more importantly, a consumer who's a bit more optimistic lately about what's happening, but now with this return to the conflict, maybe not as optimistic, mix in a little headline grabbing from a midterm election cycle that's going to be a little bit funky. And before you know it, you've got that V word coming back in a big way, volatility. And that's what's happening right now. That volatility is coming back. In spite of last week, we saw inflationary numbers that were pretty good. Core inflation came in last week, which is a 0.2 increase. A core inflation represented by CPI was only 2.6%. So really pretty good, not a bad number. Headline inflation, 2.9%. Not a terrible number. In fact, when we think about was 2.9, now 2.6 on core. Headline number came in at 3.5%, down from 4.2. So that was a pretty nice number. Yet the market didn't really care very much because of the return spike in oil that happened just recently. Remember, the market's always looking forward, always looking at what's going to happen next. And even though we had good data last week, the price of oil went higher, eliminating that possibility, which means gasoline, at a time we're all driving a lot, is going to be a bit more expensive. We got a break there for the month of June and part of July, but you're going to see those prices tick back higher again. Now, we have seen good data out of manufacturing. I mentioned the service sector still in expansion and the manufacturing sector still in expansion. But we look at some of the other smaller markets. Philadelphia manufacturing, New Jersey manufacturing came out beating expectations by a lot. So we're not seeing the higher price of oil really affecting the overall manufacturing sector just yet. But certainly we have a concern that higher for longer would be bad. Saw some data on housing. Can you believe it? That just about 2 out of every 4 new homes that are bought by people over the age of 47. 1 out of 3 new mortgages is people over the age of 47. The housing market's very tight with the price of homes now at $440,000. Quite incredible. We've got a housing issue on your hands that just doesn't seem to want to go away. So that's quite disappointing. I'd add a few more things here that I think are very headline grabbing. This is going to be a sort of a quiet week right now. But I did appreciate the latest comments that what the Federal Reserve, specifically Kevin Warsh, is saying. That Warsh doesn't look at forward guidance, that he's more inclined with what's happening right now and doesn't want to put out a lot of where the Fed is going, more of what the Fed is doing. So I think that's very important. And I think the idea of a rate cut would be a huge promise right now that, in fact, we have this scenario where oil is pushing higher. So I like that the Fed is saying less, not as disruptive to markets. Forgive me, it's getting a little loud behind me. People are coming in for lunch. It took me a little longer than I expected to get this podcast done. I apologize. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. I just thought it'd be fun to do it a little bit different today. But anyway, when we think about what's happening with the Federal Reserve, it is pretty exciting that, in fact, they're, I think, doing a little bit less in the public eye, but now focused on managing the Federal Reserve balance sheet, maybe reducing all that excess money to the federal government, which should bring down inflation. So I'm excited to see that. And I don't think we're in for a rate hike. I really be surprised if a hike's going to come. I think we have a scenario where, in fact, not a hike, but in fact, I would argue the federal funds rate was going to end up in that 1 to 2 cuts over the next year. To me, makes a lot more sense over the long run than where we are at today. I'm not terribly worried about where the Fed is, but I think the news out of last week from the Federal Reserve was pretty promising. I'm going to wrap it up this week. I'm not going to bore you to tears. I'll do a couple of fun things. First of all, the garden going gangbusters. I added some mushroom mulch this year, plus some extra lime and a little bit more fertilizer. The garden needed a refresh. I had some fungus issues last year. Well, boy, oh boy, am I crushing it this year. Really happy to see my 96 plants are in full. In fact, I got to find some time. I've been on the road a bit. I got to find some time to trim off those little branches that don't produce fruit so I get the best fruit possible. I get a lot of people asking me for my recipe on sauce. If you want that recipe, email me. I'll gladly reach out to you. You can find me on the Mosaic Research website. We have a LAMP at Ladenburg.com. That's LAMP at Ladenburg, LADENBURG.com. Email me, and I will gladly send you my family's sauce recipe that we've been using for generations. And then most importantly, when I think about these summer days, these long, warm summer days, the cup is over. Maybe it's time to take a breath, relax a little bit. I just had a wonderful conversation about, maybe it's time to think about your subconscious mind and reprogramming ourselves to not go a million miles an hour and worry about so many headlines that are to come. The world is full of crazy headlines out there, and I sometimes worry that we get too worked up about it. Remember, fear sells. That's why they make us. That's how they sell you stuff. I want to be the antidote to that. I want to be the antidote to fear. Because the reality is the stock market's up 3 out of every 4 years. We're in some of the greatest earnings ever, some of the best profit margins ever. We're on the cusp of using AI to make us more productive. When I went to Japan for a week, every picture I took and uploaded to ChatGPT told me where I was, what I was looking at, educated me, and helped me have a wonderful, more productive trip with my daughter. Expand that everywhere. That's our future. And by the way, here's a fun fact for you. Of the 22,000 companies that are actively using AI in a very aggressive way, those 22,000 people have increased their employment by 10 to 12%, not decreased. and AI has not taken any jobs yet. And just think, when we focus on the regulation of AI, the compliance of AI, how do we use it more effectively? That's more jobs, not less. I'm not worried about AI taking jobs. That just doesn't seem to be the case to me. And is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the $700 billion being spent on AI really going to be create all this kinds of revenue and productivity? So far, it is. We're not seeing that. Remember Siobhan's paradox. Every time a new technology happened, they made us more productive and made us more and employed more people, going back to the 1800s. So I get a lot of negative thoughts around that. Folks worried about the future because of what AI might do. Yeah, it needs more power, and we'll find ways to generate power without crushing the grid. You have to. We're already out there. Modular nuclear reactors, we talked about on the podcast. But certainly, I think there's too much negativity out there right now. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff out there about the midterm elections and the Iran-U.S. war, if you call it that, conflict, whatever. Maybe a never-ending conclusion to Russia-Ukraine. But the underlying health of the U.S. economy is good. And you see it in the really low unemployment numbers. You see it in wages in just about every sector being above the rate of inflation. You see it in the success of the earnings cycle. And for me, I just don't buy into the negativity, especially after a pretty amazing World Cup. Kudos to FIFA. I thought that Messi got some favorable calls. I'm not going to go there. Really mad that Italy wasn't in it. But the body of work of the World Cup was awesome. The way it finished up. I mean, it was if the gods scripted it. New Jersey had smoky air on Friday, a little bit better on Saturday. A storm came through, blew it out. 75 degrees, perfect sunshine, an incredible end to an amazing World Cup. I'm a big World Cup fan of the Cup. My shout out of the week goes to Messi, Leonardo Messi. And the reason why I don't think he's the greatest of all time. I think Pele will always be the greatest. When you're able to do things no one else can do, that to me separates you from everybody else. But certainly in the conversation of the greats of all time, I put Roberto Baggio in there, my own personal opinion. That might discredit some of you big soccer aficionados, but with Messi has to be in the conversation with Maradona and Ronaldo and all the other greats. And one thing about this cup retired a lot of great players: Harry Kane, Krosovic, Milosevic, and obviously Messi, and on and on. I think there's a whole host of great. There are 10 great players that will never touch the World Cup field again. Paving the way for new kids like Yamin, a great player for sure, going to be even better. But in the end, I'll give my shout out of the week to Messi. He really was a guy who put soccer on his shoulders for the whole world, brought some pretty exciting moments to the soccer world. And I think what's most exciting for a guy that he's playing in the United States, not done yet, he's emblematic of what a great soccer player is and how the beautiful game, why the beautiful game is beautiful. That he could do something for the soccer ball that just seemed incredible. So this week, I give it to the latest GOAT, not the only GOAT, but the latest GOAT. I get a few of them. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Got a little loud behind me, but I'm here at the Odyssey event with some of my favorite people that I get to see, some incredible financial advisors, folks who are helping us all grow our money, focus on markets, and be a great success. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.